When people say Richmond, they're usually thinking about the city. But what they don't realize, at least not at first, is that the Richmond metro area is made up of a whole network of different communities, counties, and small towns. And they all live very differently. You could be near the river, walkable neighborhoods, and historic homes, or 20 minutes away in a completely different setup. Newer homes, more space, easier day-to-day routines. And depending on which part of the metro you land in, your day-to-day life could look completely different, even if your budget stays the same. That's really what catches people off guard. It's not one lifestyle. It's a collection of completely different ways to live, all under the Richmond umbrella. And I'll tell you this, most people don't realize they picked the wrong part of Richmond until after they've already moved. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through what living in the Richmond, Virginia metro area actually looks like right now, what people tend to misunderstand before they move here, and how to figure out which part of this region actually fits your life, especially if you're planning a move in the near future and want to be really intentional about where you land. One thing about the Richmond metro, and I say this as someone who's lived here my whole life, is how quickly it can change depending on where you are. You could be out in Western Henrico or Midlothian during the day, running errands, everything feeling smooth and easy. And then later that evening, you're closer to the city. Different pace, different energy, different experience entirely. That's not unusual here. That's actually how this region is designed. Quick test for you. If your ideal day includes more parking stress than front porch time, you're probably looking at the wrong part of this metro, because living in the city of Richmond feels different than living in Henrico, which feels different than Chesterfield, which feels different than Hanover or Powhatan or Goochland. Same metro, completely different day to day. And the people who end up happiest here are the ones who take a step back early and ask, which part of this region actually fits how I live? Because once that clicks, everything else gets easier. A lot of people are looking at the Richmond metro area right now for obvious reasons, but they stay interested for reasons that don't always get explained well online. Yes, location matters. You're on the East Coast within a few hours of DC, the mountains and the beaches. And compared to a lot of Northeast markets, this area can still feel more approachable from a pricing standpoint. But that's not really what makes people stick. The real draw is how much range this metro gives you. Within the same region, you can have walkable historic neighborhoods closer to the city, river access and outdoor focused living, suburban areas where your day runs smoother like Short Pump, Glen Allen, and Midlothian, or more space and quieter settings in places like Hanover, Powhatan, or Goochland. And that's what's different here. Most metros kind of push you into one lifestyle. The Richmond area doesn't. It gives you multiple ways to live without having to leave the region entirely. But here's where people get tripped up. They pick based on what sounds good, not based on how they actually live. Different parts of the metro are built for different kinds of buyers. Let me save you a mistake I see all the time. I had a client relocating from New York who came in thinking they wanted the walkable city-style experience. But once we talked through the real routine, what their weekdays actually look like, that changed. They weren't going out multiple nights a week. They wanted easier mornings, less friction, more space. So instead of focusing on the city, we shifted into parts of the metro that supported that. And everything about their search got easier after that. And if you've already got a neighborhood in your head right now, there's a good chance we'd end up pressure testing that pretty quickly. That's the moment where people really get Richmond, not when they pick a house, but when they match their lifestyle to the right part of the metro. For a lot of buyers coming from the more intense markets, this area just feels more manageable. Not slow, not boring, just easier to live in. That's a big reason people move from thinking about it to actually making the move. If you're planning a move in the next few months, this is the part you don't want to guess on, because once you narrow in on the right part of the metro, everything else gets easier. This is where most people either get Richmond completely right or quietly regret their decision later. This metro does not give everyone the same experience, not even close. Some areas give you proximity, some give you convenience, some give you space and quiet, and each one comes with trade-offs. For the city side crowd, the draw is obvious. The Fan, Museum Districts, parts of Church Hill, those areas have energy. You can walk outside and your day is already moving. Restaurants, coffee shops, people out, things happening. But there's a catch. And this is where I'll slow you down for a second, because this decision has way more to do with your Tuesday than your Saturday. A lot of buyers fall in love with what life could look like, not what it actually looks like most of the week. That's where the suburban side of the metro starts to make more sense for a lot of people. Short Pump, Glen Allen, Midlothian, parts of the West End. These areas are built for smoother days, easier parking, more predictable routines, tighter errand loops, and you can get through your day without feeling like everything takes extra effort. Quick question for you. Are you someone who wants everything close or everything easy? Because those are not always the same thing here. And then you've got another layer of the metro. Mechanicsville, Montpelier, Ashland, Powhatan, Goochland. More space, more quiet, more separation from the pace of everything else. For some buyers, that feels like a reset. For others, it feels too far removed. And then there are buyers looking for value and opportunity. That's where areas like Verona or parts of the East End start getting attention. Different price points, different pace, different entry into the metro. Not better or worse, just different. And that's really the point. You're not just choosing a neighborhood, you're choosing your pace, your routine, your version of convenience. Get that right and everything feels easier. Miss it and even a great house can feel off. This next part is where Richmond either feels really easy or unexpectedly frustrating. On paper, the commute here sounds manageable, around 24 to 26 minutes, and technically it is. But that number doesn't tell the full story, because here's the truth. Richmond is not a distant city, it's a route city. Two homes can be 5 miles apart and give you completely different days. Let me give you a real example of this. I had a family relocating here working in southern Chesterfield. They love the Short Pump area, but when they looked at the map, they assumed they needed to be closer. So they started focusing on Woodlake. And on paper, that made sense. Shorter distance, looks closer, but I asked them to try something. I said, just humor me for a second. Drive both routes during your actual commute times, morning and afternoon. Real conditions. So they did. And what they found was what I already knew. Because of how the roads are laid out and how traffic actually flows here, Short Pump was only about 2 minutes longer, even though the mileage difference looked a lot bigger on paper, and that completely changed their decision. And this is why I always slow buyers down at this point, because what looks right on the map doesn't always match real life here. If you've been thinking Richmond is just coasting on charm, the next part matters, because this is where a lot of people misread what's actually happening in this metro. Richmond isn't just growing, it's getting stronger in a way that's a little quieter than other cities, and that's easy to miss if you're only looking at headlines. The metro is up about 4.1% since 2020, and a big part of that is domestic migration. People choosing to move here from around the world. That's not random. That's people making intentional decisions. But here's the part that matters more. That growth is not happening evenly across the map. Some parts of the Richmond metro are moving faster than others, and if you don't know where that's happening, it's really easy to miss it. You see it in places like Short Pump, Midlothian, and the West End. Those areas don't feel like outside of the city anymore. They feel like their own hubs. More development, more retail, more infrastructure. At the same time, areas like Manchester and parts of downtown have continued to build out and evolve. So this isn't just suburban growth. It's a metro that's developing multiple centers of activity. And that's important because a lot of cities rely on one main corridor. Richmond doesn't. It's spreading out its strength. And underneath of all of that, the job base here is steady. Healthcare, finance, logistics, government. Those sectors give the region stability. Then you layer in growth areas, tech, data centers, cybersecurity, life sciences, and you start to see where this is going. This isn't just a nice place to live anymore. It's a place people are choosing strategically. And this is where I'll pause for a second, because if you're thinking about buying here in the next few months, you don't just want to know what Richmond is today. You want to understand what parts of this metro are gaining momentum, because that's what shapes your experience after you move. This is where expectations and reality usually collide, because Richmond is not one price point. It's multiple conversations happening at once. The metro median is sitting in the low to mid $400,000 range. And if you're coming from Northern Virginia, DC, California, or New York, that can sound pretty reasonable at first. But here's where people relax a little too quickly. That number doesn't reflect how this market actually behaves once you start narrowing in, because the second you start targeting specific parts of the metro, the numbers shift. You go after walkability and older homes closer to the city, prices move up. You go after newer homes, easier routines, suburban convenience, prices move up. You want both? Now you're competing at a higher level altogether. And this is where I'll ask you something. If you had to choose right now, would you rather have more house or a better location? Because most buyers end up making that decision at some point. And that's not a bad thing. It's just part of getting clear on what matters to you. Some homes are still moving quickly, well priced, well located, in good condition. This is the part a lot of online advice gets wrong. And this is where I'll give you a real-time snapshot of what's happening right now. We're still seeing multiple offers in certain parts of the Richmond metro, especially when a home is priced well and shows well. So if you're planning to buy here in the next few months, this is not a throw something out and see if it sticks kind of market. You may not always have to be the highest price, but you do need to be thoughtful about your terms, your timing, and how your offer is positioned. Because the buyers who understand that upfront tend to win a lot faster and with a lot less stress. And this is actually something I walk my clients through step by step, how to structure a competitive offer without overpaying or feeling like you're guessing. So if you're in that window where you're planning to buy in the next 3 to 6 months, I put together a breakdown of what's actually working right now in this market. Pricing strategy, terms that are getting accepted, and how to approach multiple offer situations. I'll link that below for you, or you can grab it right here. At the same time, other homes are sitting, so this isn't one smooth, predictable market. It's layered. And once you understand that, the next question becomes a lot more personal. Not just, what can I afford? But where am I actually going to feel good living? So this is where people either feel completely validated or they realize this might not be their place. And this is also the part most videos skip, who this doesn't work for, because Richmond isn't trying to be everything to everyone, and that's actually one of its strengths. Richmond tends to work really well for people who are looking for more balance, more space, more manageable pace, more flexibility in how they live. And I've seen that play out in a lot of different ways. If you're the kind of person who values a smoother routine, less friction in your day, a home that actually supports how you live, this area can make a lot of sense. But the version of Richmond you choose matters. If you want walkability, older homes, and more activity, you'll likely be drawn towards the city and nearby areas. If you want convenience, newer homes, and easier day-to-day flow, a lot of the suburban parts of the metro tend to fit better. If you want space, quieter surroundings, and a little more separation, you'll probably find yourself looking further out. Same metro, very different experience. And this is where expectations really matter. If you're trying to get everything at once, Brand new home, walkability, large lot, low price, easy commute. That combination is going to be tough to find here, and that's okay. It just means you need to prioritize what matters most to you. It can also feel a little too measured for people who are looking for non-stop big city energy. Richmond has personality, it has activity, but it's not DC, and it's not trying to be. And here's something to think about. If one version of this metro has been standing out to you this whole time, that probably means something. If none of it feels quite right, maybe it feels too spread out, too car dependent, or like too many trade-offs, that also means something. Better to figure that out now than after you've already made the move. Because at the end of the day, like we talked about earlier, most people think they're choosing Richmond, but what they're really choosing is a very specific version of this metro and the kind of life that comes with it. At the end of the day, Richmond works really well, but only when you line up the right part of the metro with the way you actually live. That's what we've really been talking about this whole time. The personality, the routine, the commute, the cost, and who this area actually fits. So, if you've been watching this and thinking, okay, I think I know which direction I'm leaning, that's the point where it makes sense to start getting specific. And if you're planning a move to the Richmond Metro in the next few months, that's exactly what I help with. Not finding a house, but helping you narrow down the right part of this entire region so you're not guessing when it comes time to make a decision. All of my contact information is in the description below, and I'd also recommend watching the next video in this playlist because this gave you the big picture, and the next one will help you zoom in on specific areas that might fit what you're looking for. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and I'll see you in the next video.